Well, congratulations. You just passed what is, I think, probably the most difficult step of all the 10 that I'm going to be discussing with you. To learn to diagram short arguments is to adopt a perspective on argument that is already far more sophisticated than a lot of people have the ability to develop. What we're doing in step 4 is really not adding any new material. We're just moving from short, fairly well-defined arguments to longer, more complex arguments. The same basic tools apply. There's nothing added. You still got the subarguments, you still got the independent premises, you still got the dependent premises, you still got the unstated premise. The only difference now is that you have a more unwieldy amount of language. So what I want to do in this step is just give you some tips so that you can get into a very, very complex argument and produce just as accurate a diagram of it as you have been doing with short arguments. Okay. The first thing to remember is something that we talked a little bit about in the last step. The order of the ideas in the original piece of argument is irrelevant to you. Okay? Now, occasionally, some beautiful arguer is going to lay it out all for you and say, I'm going to do this and this, and then I'm going to move on to this claim, and I'm going to give you evidence. Thomas Friedman sometimes does this in an incredibly linear fashion. And that's wonderful, makes your job easier. But 9 times out of 10, when you're dealing with a long argument, the different subarguments are going to be scattered all over the place. So, do not place any faith in being able to read through the argument in a linear fashion and have a diagram simply emerge. Okay. Second of all, in longer arguments, it's more likely that you're going to come across the concept of the counter-argument, where people, in order to develop their own premise, present an opposite view to their own, and then refute it. Don't get confused by this. This is nothing more than another example of a subargument, where a person might say, well, this pundit claims X. Here's evidence why this claim is wrong. Therefore, my opposite conclusion is correct. So keep in mind that longer arguments often involve evidence for the other side that's still functioning as evidence for their own conclusion. Just these 2 little pieces of advice that I've already given you show the need for a different kind of reading. You need to read arguments in a different way in order to get at their structure. All along in the steps that we've passed so far, we've been talking about purpose, not about what the claims say, not about their content, but what are they doing? What's their job? That has to be the central question as you read an argument. How is the evidence being put together here? Now, even more importantly than with short arguments, when you're dealing with long arguments, you must get the conclusion correct. And if it's a very long argument, it's possible there's more than one conclusion. So the first step is the same. Find and isolate, paraphrase if need be, the conclusion or conclusions of the argument that you're reading. The next step is a little bit different, though. When you're dealing with a very large and sprawling argument, get the conclusion down. That's going to be your lodestar. Okay, that's going to be where you focus. And again, if that's wrong, nothing's going to be right. Get that settled. And then take a step back from the whole argument. Does it have 3 main branches of evidence? Does it have maybe 2? Get a general sense for how the argument may be structured. Don't worry about the details, the very small subarguments right now. Just sort of it's as if you were looking at a road map. Just get the big blue lines clear first. Get the major arteries of evidence clear in your mind first. Just sort of sketch them out. Now you have it's sort of fuzzy. It's not clear yet, but you have something to work with. Now start isolating premises. Now my hope in this step is that you'll be working in groups. And specifically, I would really encourage you to take a very large argument and work out a diagram on the floor using index cards. Because that way, you're going to be able to correct mistakes more easily. Put every single premise on a singular index card and move it around on the floor so that you're building a large diagram on a very large space. And therefore, if you find, wow, I thought this was a whole subargument, I thought it was an independent branch, turns out it's dependent, it belongs over here. It's easy to move. And with such large arguments, it really can be helpful to have other minds working with you, although of course, eventually, you're going to have to do a large diagram on your own. Now, remember, there's no new material in this step. You know everything you need to know. You're just going to be doing it on a larger scale, holding more claims and more relationships in your head at the same time. Good luck.